Welcome, warm welcome also from me. My name is Inken, and I'm super grateful and happy to be one of your hosts of the Lightwire Collective. Our hearts are wide open for you every Sunday at the same time, and we really just enjoy to be here with you, to connect, to inspire you, and to practice together, because we truly believe that it's so important to do your inner work, to work on your self-empowerment and just on loving connection. So especially in these days, that's so important. And we enjoy each Sunday to see all of you beautiful people joining us and co-creating together with us this wonderful space. And I hope you really had a wonderful week and a restful weekend. Do you say that in English? My English sometimes is not perfect. But you know what I mean. And if it wasn't like that, and if it maybe was a shadow week, then I think this session is really for you. And we are extremely happy that Manoj is back with us. He has served the community already, and he's a wonderful soul and a very powerful guide. So I feel very blessed that you're back in the space, shining your light on our community. And I will hand it over now to Trent, so he can do the further introduction. But I wanted to tell from my side, thank you very much for being back, Manoj, and I can't wait to do the session with you.
Okay, so Manoj is an executive leadership coach and consultant. He is constantly in conversation with my brother. So it's funny, like I'll be with my brother and we'll be talking about, some of the inner work, and my brother has a therapist business. And so he's like in the, weeds with all that. And that's what he does day in and day out clinically. And then Manoj calls, like that happens so often, and just joins right in on the conversation. So I'm pleased to bring him back and have him lead us through this shadow work session. So without further ado, here is Manoj.
Thank you so much, Trent. Thank you so much, Inken. Thank you for everybody being here. I'm really excited to work with you all. And let's go ahead and get started. And as mentioned before, if you have something to write with, a journal, this will come in very handy because we're going to be going over some of the basics of shadow work, but we also want to make it very practical and specific for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just want to make sure this works. So if somebody could confirm for me if they see what I'm seeing, sounds good. Okay, awesome. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to cover for today, or what we envision to cover for today. So at the beginning, we're going to just cover a little bit of the background of shadow work. What is it? What are some of the key principles and ideas that you need to know? And aside from that, we're going to do a guided hypnosis or a guided meditation around shadow work. And this is where you're going to really experience, what is the shadow? Do I have a shadow? What is the shadow really like? What's behind the curtain? So you want to be very present. You want to just understand what's happening. And so when we go through that, you might have some questions show up or some experiences show up. And then that's where we will have a little bit more of the Q&A session with some coaching as well. But feel free to take notes. And I'm trying to distill a lot of what shadow work is. So this will not be everything on shadow work. There are plenty of wonderful coaches that you are getting access to in the Light Warrior Collective who are covering different elements and different aspects of shadow work. So I encourage you to keep going on the journey, because it's not going to be like done in one session. You're not going to like heal the shadow or integrate the shadow in one session. Keep doing the work. As questions come up, definitely reach out to some of the wonderful coaches that you have at the community, and then we will close. So let's go into a little bit of where this started. And this is a quote from Carl Jung, and he says, "Unless you learn to face your own shadows, you will continue to see them in others, because the world outside of you is only a reflection of the world inside of you." So what this means is, you're going to see different aspects of the shadow. And what I want you to focus on is like just three major principles. And we want to focus on triggers, wounds, and healing. So triggers, wounds, and healing. And we're going to go into that a little bit more as we come through some of the slides. But I want to make this practical for you. So I'm going to be showing some examples of where the shadow is extreme, some examples of where the shadow is slightly getting out of control, and then some examples of where the shadow is healed and integrated with the being. So some of the mindsets you want to keep in mind is, there is no judgment around the shadow. You don't want to judge and be critical of the shadow. Wherever your shadow is wherever it is. Have compassion for where you are in your journey. No matter what experience you have, everything will be okay. And as long as you're on this journey and you are confronting the shadow, you are willing to work with the shadow, there is an opportunity for healing and integrating the shadow so that there's aspects that can be integrated. So Carl Jung was really like the founder of like this concept. And there are many others who contributed to this idea over time. And there's a lot of research that has gone into this idea over time. Now, like I said, we want to focus on triggers, wounds, and healing. As long as we can just focus on that, this will kind of help the introductory side of everything. So just pay attention to those three core concepts. Now, we're going to just show an example of an extreme example. So this is a character. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the 90s films, but this was a character. Does anybody know who this character is or which movie this is? Yeah. Trent, do you want to answer that question, or if
Go
anybody
ahead
else
and
wants
date
to?
myself here, but I believe that's Scream.
That's right. That's right. So thank you, Trent. So this character is what we call Billy Loomis. He was a character in the movie called Scream. And he appears on the outside to be an average, charming high school student. And he's the boyfriend of the protagonist in the movie, Sidney Prescott. And some of the things that you'll see with Billy Loomis is he seems very, very charming. He's very gregarious. People want to be in his circle. He's seen as one of the cool kids on campus. But behind the curtains, there's an element of Billy Loomis that is repressed. There's an element of repressed rage, resentment, and his shadow just has a lot of anger. And it's particularly towards his mother, who he had abandonment with. And his mother left after discovering that Billy's father had an affair with the protagonist's mother, Sidney Prescott. And instead of processing the trauma and pain, he represses his emotions. He redirects that rage towards Sidney Prescott, who he doesn't tell the relationship of the backstory. And she only finds out towards the end, and that her boyfriend is, has a really dark shadow and this unresolved trauma. And in addition, he has this obsession with control. You'll see this throughout the plot of the film. He has this desire for power, and it keeps manifesting with the need to orchestrate everything in his life. And when things do not work according to the plan, he gets angry, and you'll see that as a shadow coming forth. And he also has the element of detached empathy. He does not have the capacity to share emotions that other people are going through. He doesn't have the experience to have compassion and empathy for others and what they're going through to put himself in other people's shoes. And instead, he ends up turning into um, what we call Ghostface. He's one of the Ghostface killers in that film. Now, this is a very, very extreme example. Now, I'm just trying to show you this as an example of what happens when we don't keep the shadow in check. Now, I'm not saying this will happen to everybody. Now, obviously, this is a very extreme Hollywood example, right? But this is misdirected hatred towards women, abandonment issues. There's all sorts of control issues because he didn't have control as a child. So a lot of this turns into these darker manifestations. So when we are going through this, I want you to focus on what are the triggers? What are the triggers for yourself that you notice with your own personal shadow? And I'm going to give you some examples here in the next slide. So sometimes you'll notice that something happens. And when something happens, you make it mean something about yourself, you make it mean something about others, and then you act as if the world is a certain way. So maybe you get publicly embarrassed, and so shame creeps in. Once that shame creeps in, then you feel the need to act out in a certain way or to hide and to cower in a certain way. All of these are common triggers for the shadow. So you'll see some examples: shame, guilt, anger, right? Maybe it's an injustice. Maybe you see something as an injustice and it triggers you and it makes you feel the need to act out, to speak out, to retaliate. Notice what your personal triggers are. And these are some of the common ones. So take a moment to just really think about what are your personal triggers. And if you have your pen and paper ready, just start journaling on, just write down any of these triggers that you find apply to you. Sadness, failure. Failure is a very big one for a lot of folks. You know, we went through schooling and sometimes we were comparing ourselves to other folks in school and we were wondering, where do we line up with the rest of society? And we had guidance counselors telling us what our future would be, trying to help us assess where we are going to end up in life. And sometimes when we fail on an exam or we don't get the grades that we were expecting, sometimes our parents would react a certain way or respond a certain way. I can't believe you got these grades. Or well done, son, or well done, daughter. You did really well on school. And so sometimes we have these expectations that show up. Now, some of the other ones that show up, these aren't just going to be in a business setting. Sometimes it's in relationships. How do you feel when your significant other is hanging around somebody of the opposite gender? Are you feeling those emotions of jealousy? Are you feeling those emotions of envy? How does this show up? See, these are elements of your shadow that we need to look at. What are the triggers that are causing this? And a lot of the times in relationships, resentment, it's very, very subtle. Sometimes we resent our partner, we resent our loved ones for something that they did that they never took responsibility for or that they keep doing, and we don't communicate it. And it starts building and building and building resentment. And it just keeps building there until one final blow up where we just had enough and we're just going to let them get a piece of our mind. See, we want to pay attention to what are our personal triggers. A lot of people have triggers around rejection, abandonment. This is very, very common. You know, maybe you was very young and you told the girl in school that you like her, but then she started laughing and then she like ran and told her friends and then you felt humiliated. So like rejection, it can cause a deep-seated fear. And even in later on in life, it can even create this fear of communicating, being authentic, being vulnerable with others. We want to really pay attention to where this is coming from. Another one is lack of approval. So sometimes we long for the approval of the father figure or the mother figure. And sometimes we want them to just tell us how proud they are of us. And sometimes we haven't heard them express that. And so what we end up doing is we try to compensate for it and try to build up a persona, build up a mask, so to speak, of success, accomplishment. Sometimes it's an idea like, I'll show them. They never believed in me. I'm going to show them. I'm going to prove it to them. Just notice if any of this resonates with you And if you're noticing this, feel free to write this down because this will come up. There's other examples of lack of control. This is a very common one for those who have, um, sometimes it's called obsessive compulsive disorder, but, you know, everybody has some level of wanting order in their life. That's very normal, right? So maybe you obsessively clean. Sometimes you're very, very ordered in your timing with things. Sometimes when people don't show up to an engagement or show up to a meeting, it triggers you about, oh my gosh, what are they doing? And maybe you have all these judgments about why they're not showing up on time. I showed up on time. Why can't they? There's some element of control there. And then also look at safety. Safety is a big one. And you want to remember that your subconscious mind, the subconscious mind, your mind has two parts, the conscious mind and then the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is responsible for close to 95% of your results. And it's responsible for your breathing, your heart rate, all these unconscious autopilot things that the body is responsible for, breathing, blood work, distributing chemicals to different parts of the body. It's responsible for all of that. Now, its prime directive is safety. Your subconscious or your unconscious mind, it's wired in a way to keep you safe. It wants to keep you safe. So if you are going through any of these triggers, its primary motivation is to keep you safe. So there's a coping mechanism that your subconscious mind has around keeping you safe. Now, some of the other prominent triggers you'll see, maybe if you've had a trauma, this is very common for folks who've gone through abuse or things of that nature. There's a trauma associated with it that needs to be healed. The other big ones, hopelessness, helplessness, powerlessness, they all feel a little bit different, but those are very big ones. Pay attention to what that looks like. And then this one happens in relationships, the unmet desires or suppressed needs. So when you're in a relationship and you're with your significant other and there's unmet desires or suppressed needs, it can feel a certain way. Maybe you're bottling up what you feel. Maybe you want to express something, I need this or I want that, but you can't quite communicate it. And that can be very closely connected to resentment. Now, I think I mentioned lack of love, but it's also similar to approval. Um, so lack of love, maybe you're looking for love from somebody and maybe it's in the wrong place. And one of the biggest triggers for folks is betrayal. So if you have a recent example of betrayal, this can manifest very, very strongly with money, can very, very strongly manifest with love. It can create the effect of the straw that broke the camel's back. Once you have a betrayal so strong, you may not want to associate with others. And maybe you'll make a decision about how the world is, a generalization, a sweeping generalization of how the world is, how people are. Men are this way, women are that way. All relationships suck because of this. I hate business because of that. The government is this, politics is that. Notice how these generalizations can be like very, very wide across the board, and they may or may not even be true. And that's very closely connected to um, the trigger of injustice. So when you feel injustice, sometimes there's a repressed anger, sometimes there is a deep-seated anger, sometimes there's this desire to retaliate, to get a pound of flesh, to get that revenge that you've been desiring. So I hope this has helped in terms of finding the triggers. Now, let's go to another example of the shadow. Now, this is a common one. Now, who recognizes not just the actor, but who recognizes who this character is? Okay.
That's Jay Gatsby.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. That's Jay Gatsby. So he, on the surface, represents somebody who is extremely wealthy, extremely successful, charismatic. throws lavish parties. You know, he embodies the dream of anyone, not just the American dream, but like anybody's dream lifestyle. But as you go through the book or the movie, you start to see that Jay Gatsby, on the surface, he might seem like he has it all together, but there's some inconsistencies, some insecurities that are very, very deep-seated. And you'll notice this with his love obsession with this woman named Daisy and his inability to let go of the past. And it's rooted in this trauma around poverty and rejection. So he grew up very poor. He was rejected as a child. He's constantly seeking the love and the approval of this woman named Daisy, and she's not giving to him what he's looking for. Now, this is a clear example of what happens when you fail to integrate your shadow. This is a more relatable one, less extreme than the example of Scream, right? But there's an unattainable future with Daisy, and it leads to his tragic downfall. Now, when you look at the shadow side of things, you know, he has an obsession with his past. His life is consumed by creating a future that's opposite of his past. He was poor and broke when he was growing up, and so now um, he has to be very, very lavish, very, very rich. He has an idealization of Daisy that's not real. You know, Daisy has her own flaws. She's human. But Jay Gatsby, his shadow is preventing him from seeing Daisy's flaws. And instead, he's fantasizing, he's romanticizing, he's idealizing this woman. And he sees her as a symbol of all the things that he wanted as a child, but never could quite obtain. So, wealth, status, validation. All of these things are what Daisy represents. And just remember, the subconscious mind, it tends to think in symbols and emotion, symbols and emotion. So if you want to have access to healing elements of your shadow, you need to pay attention to what is this person symbolic of? What is this situation symbolic of? Maybe there's imagery that's associated with it. And then there's also emotions that are associated with it. And you notice Jay Gatsby has an inability to accept the reality of the situation, and he's very insecure about his social standing and his social status. He grew up in poverty, and so he believes that his wealth will erase all his insecurities, but sad to say, that's just not how it works. You know, you'll see this all the time with celebrities who get, you know, they'll get reconstructive surgery or plastic surgery, and sometimes their insecurities are still there even though they look totally different. Maybe they look amazing, but deep down, there's still some insecurities there. So when you see Jay Gatsby, you'll notice that there is a shadow side of him. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he's blind to the truth that Daisy cannot live up to his idealized image of her, and that the past really can't be recreated. He has a refusal to accept the future and where he actually is. And so this inadequacy is just consuming him. And you see it more and more with time that this person who looks polished and proper, just he has a lot of problems behind the curtains. So we've talked about triggers a little bit. Now I want to talk about the wounds. Now, these are some of the very, very common wounds that take place with the shadow. These are how this is what's happening behind those triggers. There's usually about four of major ones. There's abandonment, there's guilt, there's trust, there's neglect. So let's just kind of go through a little bit of each, right? And just for the interest of time, I'm just gonna kind of quickly go over it. So if you need to take a picture, feel free. Um, but so abandonment means there's a fear of being left out, maybe being left behind. Maybe you dread being alone. It can result in codependent behaviors. It can, you know, maybe when you feel abandoned, maybe you will preventatively or proactively threaten to leave before somebody can abandon you. Maybe you're questioning on a subconscious level, will they leave me? Will you leave me? This is something that you have to pay attention to in relationships. It's a very common one. And sometimes it means that we attract emotionally unavailable relationships. Now, another example is trust. Now, with trust, there's a fear of being hurt. And sometimes we don't trust ourselves. See, that's what's really happening there. We don't trust ourselves, but we also don't trust others. And so we try to collect evidence of all the ways why we can't trust that person. And sometimes it has those deep-seated insecurities that lead us to create this self-fulfilling prophecy. See, I told you I could never trust that person. They're always going to betray me. They're always going to let me down. And it's really stemming from this place of not feeling safe. And so the subconscious mind, remember what I said, that its prime directive is to keep you safe. So this trust wound, it keeps people safe by projecting that I can't trust them, so I need to keep them at distance. So the way it also feels safe is it attracts like-minded folks in relationships or business relationships. You attract other people who also can't trust other people. Now, the third example is guilt. Now, guilt is it's an emotion that we have to be very, very mindful and vigilant of. It doesn't actually help us get to our goals. And a lot of times it can paralyze us and it can keep us from actually taking action on what we want. And instead, it can focus us to what others want. So if you find yourself apologizing, if you find yourself saying, I'm sorry, I'm really, like, I feel bad or I feel sorry, this is very common of a guilt wound, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. It just means something happened as a child or something happened early on, and this is part of the shadow. So have compassion for wherever you're at in your journey. We all have something, right? And those who have the guilt wound, they avoid asking for things. Sometimes they use guilt to manipulate, and sometimes they're afraid to set boundaries because they feel guilty. Me, I don't feel like I should set a boundary with this person because I've done this to them or I've done that. So there's this hesitancy to actually move forward um, with boundaries. And oftentimes they'll attract people in relationships who weaponize guilt. So be very, very mindful of that. If your partner or a business person that you're working with is weaponizing guilt, because guilt is a weapon of cowards. You don't want other people to weaponize guilt against you. It is an emotion that can mentally hijack people. Now, the last common wound of the shadow is neglect. So neglect is, maybe you've been neglected as a child. Maybe your parents were very, very busy, or you had other siblings that also needed care, and so you didn't get the love and the approval you were looking for. So folks who have the neglect wound, they struggle to let things go. Sometimes it manifests in low self-worth, and sometimes they struggle to say no to people. They have a difficult time expressing their boundaries. And in addition to that, sometimes they get very angry when the attention's not on them because they've been neglected over and over and over. And it's not their fault. It's just how they were as a child, right? And sometimes when you're neglected, there is a fear of being authentic, being vulnerable, having the courage to speak up because what's familiar is being neglected. So instead, when somebody wants to really connect with them on a deep level, they may not be so trusting of that person. And what's familiar is being neglected. So they might sabotage in some kind of way. Sometimes they attract relationships with people who don't appreciate them or where they don't feel seen. So these are the examples of the wounds. Now let's go to another example here. Now, okay, so it looks like I did this one out of order, but this is Vivian in the movie Pretty Woman. So, um, she starts out as a sex worker, right? And she's very, very witty. She's very, very confident. She's very independent. She has a really good wit about her, a very good sense of humor when she starts. This is a very popular movie from the 90s, I believe. And there's a shadow there. And the shadow there has these deep-seated feelings of shame, low self-worth, fear of rejection from her past and societal judgment around her occupation, right? And it leads her to believe that she's undeserving of love and respect, right? And because of that, she has a fear of rejection. She has this belief in being unworthy. And she sees all relationships as like a temporary arrangement. She equates love with money. She equates love with getting what you want out of life. There's an emotional detachment there because she doesn't feel like it's safe to open her heart up to people. So over time, what you see is the healing aspect. Vivian, she meets a guy named Edward, and Edward is this rich, gregarious kind of man, and he really sees something in her that she doesn't see for herself. And so he ends up showing her so much kindness, so much empathy, so much love, so much compassion. And instead of allowing her shadow to run the show, she starts to integrate the shadow. She starts to heal the shadow by being open, being vulnerable, having self-compassion, having that empathy for what Edward sees in her. And because of this, her shadow, which had low self-worth, low self-esteem, those insecurities that could have run the show, it ends up having a shift. It ends up having a transformation. And later on, you'll see that she doesn't give into the shadow, but rather she embraces the kindness of Edward. And this in turn helps grow her self-image. It grows her self-worth. And all that self-doubt that was once there is now changed and transformed into self-worth. So this is a positive example of where the shadow can be healed. It can be integrated. So she has like a total 180 in this film. Now, the third part I wanted to share, we talked about triggers, we talked about wounds, and now we're going to talk about healing a little bit. So these are common ways that you can heal the shadow. Now, this is by no means the only way, but these are some ways. And radical self-acceptance. When we talk about this, this is what in psychology they call emotional processing. This means you are sitting with the uncomfortable feeling that is within the shadow. So if you have that fear of abandonment, you're sitting with that on a deep, deep level until you deal with it. That radical self-acceptance is what that is. The other one is have a mindset of curiosity over judgment. So try not to judge where you are with your shadow. Maybe the shadow is leading to passive aggressiveness. Maybe it's leading to self-sabotage. Have a mindset of compassion and curiosity. Develop mindfulness, self-awareness. Meditation is a very powerful practice that will help you become more and more aware of the triggers, the wounds, the elements that need to be healed. And don't have this non-dualistic thinking. So don't think that it's either this or it's that. Maybe there's somewhere in between where the shadow serves a purpose and where the kindness, the forgiveness, the love can also serve a purpose. It doesn't need to be either or. And like we talked about, have compassion when you're self-reflecting, embrace courage, embrace vulnerability, embrace authenticity, have self-forgiveness for yourself. Forgiveness is one of the biggest ways of shifting parts of the painful past that we hold on to, the traumas. Have empathy for yourself. Um, don't focus on elimination, focus on integration. You want to heal those parts of yourself and reintegrate into one being. That's a major, major concept here. Now, some of the practical ways, dream interpretation. This is a very common one. I do this for folks. There's a lot of things that your mind is trying to tell you, your subconscious mind is trying to tell you. And we talked about how the subconscious mind, the way you communicate with it is imagery, symbolism, or emotions. It's imagery and symbolism or emotions. Just those two things. So dream interpretation, when you have dreams, write them down, have a dream journal, write those down, what it was. You'll find out that the symbolism behind the items in your dream, the people in your dream, they represent things. There were certain emotional states that you were going through. Dream interpretation is a big, big part of that. Now, obviously, like one of the ones that I focus on is hypnotherapy and guided meditation. This really helps a lot of people get through some things. We talked about meditation, EFT and tapping. This is a very powerful tool. There's different ways of doing it, but it stands for emotional freedom technique. It involves tapping on acupressure points, using some ways of communicating that help you reframe and cognitively restructure what you've gone through. NLP and timeline therapy, this is a really powerful one too. I help people with a lot of these, but anchoring is a very powerful way to integrate the shadow within yourself. And timeline therapy is a tool that you use to go back to the past where these wounds happened and to heal and to build resources with that aspect of yourself. Now, mirror work, this is a very common one. This has to do with really being present in the mirror with yourself and seeing the vulnerable side of you on the other side. Sometimes when you stare into the mirror for long durations of time, you'll notice that you have more compassion for yourself, more empathy, more forgiveness, more love. Breath work, shadow work journals, I highly recommend all of these. Journaling in general, very powerful tool. Therapy, psychotherapy, very, very powerful. And then artistic expression and self-expression. This is a very powerful one. I've been through many, many classes and workshops where we would take an idea of the shadow and we would collage. We would get magazines and we would cut out parts that represent the elements of the shadow and we would create a collage. This is a very powerful element of shadow work that will help folks. So I hope this helps. Focus on the triggers, focus on the wounds, and then we can focus on the healing and the integration. So that brings us to this quote by Carl Jung, and he says, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. So with that being said, we want to go ahead and do a little bit of shadow work. And so if you're able to, and I know you've been journaling and you've been writing some notes down, but think about what is the aspect of the shadow that you want to focus on today. Maybe it was one of those wounds, maybe it was one of those triggers, maybe it's a recent kind of thing that has happened to you. And I want you to just get yourself in a comfortable position. So if you're in your chair, you want to feel your feet on the ground. If you're lying down, just feel free to lie down comfortably. Make sure you feel your feet on the chair. Make sure your legs are uncrossed. Make sure your hands are not crossed. And if you need to take your glasses off, if you're wearing glasses, feel free to take those off so that you get totally comfortable. If you're chewing any gum, feel free to spit that out. And just begin to close your eyes. And just notice yourself and your breathing. That's it. And just take a deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. And just take another deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. And using the power of your mind and the power of your imagination, I want you to begin to imagine the number 3 in your mind's eye. And as you focus on this number 3, you begin to realize how easy it is to get into a state of deep physical relaxation. And just notice how there's a light shining down from the heavens above. And as this light shines down, it begins to rest on your head. And you notice how easy it is to feel that relaxation. Just noticing all tension beginning to drift away. Noticing the muscles of your face beginning to loosen up. All tension that has been stored in your temples, beginning to let go. That's it. Just seeing that light resting on your face, just feeling the warmth, feeling that relaxation now. Allowing that light to travel down your neck, allowing your neck to just relax now, allowing your shoulders to experience freedom and relaxation, feeling that warmth, feeling that rest, just allowing that light to travel down your arms, down your elbows, down your forearms, into your wrists, into your palms, and through your fingers. And you even feel an element of warmth on your fingertips. You might even feel a little bit of a vibration as this light continues to descend. Now going down your chest, going into your vital organs, into your lungs, into your abdomen, nourishing your kidneys, your liver, your spleen, your intestines, just going down your back, just feeling that warmth, that ability to relax going up, going down your hips, down your legs, massaging your knees, and allowing all tension to drift away now. That's it. Going down your calves, going down your shin bone, into your ankles, releasing all tension, and going into your feet, and just allowing all your toes to feel that warmth now. And using the power of your imagination, I want you to see in front of you, in your mind's eye, the number 2. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. And just noticing how your entire body feels very light. It's covered in light. And you notice that warmth all over your body. And in front of you now, you see a bit of a cloud. And this cloud represents all the thoughts you've been holding on to. And whatever you've been thinking about for this past day, this past week, this past month, it's all in that cloud. And you might notice that it has a little bit of a darker tone to it. It might be a darker gray. And I want you to just imagine holding your hands up to that cloud, noticing that your hands have this light and this ability to transform anything. And as you touch this cloud, you begin to notice that the cloud's color and tone begin to change. It starts to glow brighter and brighter and brighter still, allowing all that stress that you've been holding on to, all those worries you've been holding on to now transform into a place of love, compassion, and forgiveness. That's it. And now, begin to notice how your mind and your body are acting as one. Now, using your mind's eye and your imagination, I want you to begin to see the number 1. And the number 1 represents a deeper state of mind, a state of mind where you're conscious and your subconscious mind, your body, are all acting in harmony with one another, all acting as one. That's it. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. That's it. And now that you're at this deep level of mind, you can use the power of your imagination to influence, to shift, and to heal whatever it is that serves your best and your highest good. And I want you now to just see yourself as a being of light. And as a being of light, you notice in front of you is a door. And you begin to reach out for the doorknob so that you can begin to open this door. And as this door opens, you see the wonderful inside of a home in front of you. And as you take a step forward into this home, you begin to feel love and safety and compassion as you walk in. And you know at a deep level that you are safe, that everything is okay, and that you are just filled with love and surrounded by love. And that the healing light that is on you and in you can transform anything you see in an instant, and that it will be lasting change for your best and your highest good. And as you walk in, you begin to see the surroundings. You see stairwells, you see rooms, you see the inside of a beautiful, luxurious home. But what really catches your eye is this mirror that's off at the distance. And you begin to walk towards that mirror, slowly approaching it, noticing how elegant it looks. And as you look in, you see the most beautiful version of yourself. And as you look into that mirror, you begin to have compassion for yourself, love for yourself, and even just this happiness that you get to see yourself through this mirror. And as you look, you begin to notice that on the other side, the image is surrounded by a cloudy figure. And you start to notice a little bit of smoke. And as you notice this smoke, you remember that everything is okay, that everything is safe, and that you are surrounded with love. And as you see this smoky figure, you begin to see how your image changes into a little bit of a smoky, cloudy image. And this image represents your shadow. And just take a moment to look into the mirror, into the eyes of your shadow now. Notice what you notice, feel what you feel, hear what you hear, and just see what you see. And as you continue, you might even begin to see where the shadow first started, what wounds first started it, what triggers activate it. But you know that you are safe and that you have compassion and love, and that whatever is for your best and highest good, you can heal this shadow and integrate this shadow. Whenever the shadow needs to come out, it can. Whenever the shadow needs to be healed, it can be. Whenever it needs to be integrated, it can be. You just have compassion for yourself, knowing that the shadow is there to maintain your safety, to help you in trying times. And I want you to just reach out to the shadow through the mirror and just begin to hug the shadow. And as you hug the shadow, just begin to notice how the complexion, the tone, and the lighting begin to change. And as you hug the shadow, just begin to notice how much love and compassion is in you and around you. And just enveloping that shadow now, embracing it on a deep, deep level. Whatever the purpose of that shadow was, it was there for your safety and it kept you safe. And so you thank it for helping you in dire times. You thank it and appreciate the shadow for helping you all those times. That's it. And as you hug your shadow, you begin to notice the shadow is entering you. You and the shadow are one. And you just have this feeling of newfound freedom. You're no longer judging your shadow. You're no longer resisting your shadow. But you and your shadow are working as one. You're both working for your best and highest good. You both have love, compassion, and forgiveness for one another. Whatever you felt like the shadow did that you didn't like, you now have the ability to forgive. And whatever the shadow felt that you did that wasn't right, the shadow now has the ability to forgive. And you now have love and compassion with the both of you as you both are one. And now, as you look in the mirror, you see the most transformed version of yourself. And you see how much love and how much strength and courage you have. And you feel safe and you feel loved. And in a moment, I'm going to count to 5. And as I count to 5, you're going to remember everything that took place, everything that you saw, everything that you felt. And you're going to be able to bring all of those lessons into your future now. All of those lessons will shift and transform every aspect of you for your best and highest good. 1, just allowing all the elements of the shadow, all the lessons of the shadow to integrate into all the cells of your body, all the aspects of your mind, all the aspects of your thinking, your behaviors, and your habits. 2, just allowing yourself to see that transformed version of you as you and your shadow are one, noticing how easy it is to be united as a united front, seeing how easy and effortless it is to work in unison. 3, just beginning to feel that power, feel that love, feel how much comfort you have. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. 4, just allowing yourself to know that you and your shadow are working as one on the same team, allowing yourself to have these new enriched and powerful experiences that manifest your dreams and desires because you all are working together now. take one more deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. 5. Feeling incredible, feeling amazing, eyes wide awake, just allowing yourself to feel the full integration of that shadow now. All right, everyone. Welcome back. Just slowly come back. And I hope this hypnosis helped you. And I just wanted to read a quote by Robert Johnson here, and we can open it up for a short Q&A. I know we're over time. Sorry about that, folks. But this is a quote by Robert Johnson, and he says, unless we do conscious work on it, the shadow is always projected. That is, it is neatly laid on someone or something else. So we do not have to take responsibility for it. So when we think of the shadow work, we want to just come from a place of taking personal responsibility as well. That, yes, maybe we acted out in a certain way, but there's two aspects to ourselves that are trying to compete. And just have compassion, have empathy for wherever you're at, and it will always end up integrating and healing. And I just wanted to open this up to anybody right now. If anybody had any questions or anything that they wanted to share as insights, what they saw, what opened up for you.